Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name's Gary and I'm an alcoholic. And the deal with having Alex introduce me was Willie's. As Alex said, I consider both Willie and Alex my sons, my twin sons, as he said. And I'll tell you, it's been easier raising Alex than it was raising Willie. We were just talking, Willie, I've sponsored Willie since he was 1 month sober. And I've tried to fire him a number of times, and I cannot get rid of him. He's like glue. You know, super glue. Somebody mentioned super glue at dinner, you know, that kind of thing. And but he keeps coming back. But the interesting thing was that with Willie, that after he'd been sober for a little while, he had an opportunity to come to GREELEY, and he did come to me, and he said, okay, I go to GREELEY. He says, I'm not familiar with the AA in GREELEY. What do I do? And I said, well, what you do is you carry the message. You carry the message you learned here of Alcoholics Anonymous and sobriety. That's what you carry to GREELEY. And he did, and surprisingly enough, he found out that they'd already heard it before, but he was still going to carry it and make sure that everybody heard him. And I appreciate that kind of enthusiasm. You know, as I said, my name is Gary, and I am an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is 7/6/1976, and that's easy to remember, 7/6/76. And that was the bicentennial weekend, the weekend of the tall ships in New York, all kinds of great celebrations going on, and I remember absolutely nothing about it. I sobered up somewhere in there, and I at first thought that my sobriety date was July 4th, and then after a little bit of thinking and being sober for a few months, I decided it was July 5th. And I finally settled on July 6th because I didn't know how much further to go. You know, part of my story is simply this, that if you're an alcoholic, no matter where you start out, you're going to end up in the same place. And where I started out was, came from a family, a Irish Catholic family. There were 2 sons in the family. I have a brother that's 5 years older than I. And he became a Catholic priest, and I became a drunk. And he and I have talked about this, and the interesting thing is that both of us were not that much different, because we were both looking for and seeking the same thing. Say, if somebody had told me that, you know, the reason that I was a drunk is because I suffered from spiritual hunger, I would not have believed them nor understood what they were talking about. But what he was looking for was spiritual fulfillment, and I was looking for that in the alcohol and in the bottle. You know, Dr. Young's famous letters say that the reason alcohol is called spirits is not by accident, because that's what it is. It opens up the spiritual life to people that are seeking. Problem is, it's like they say, you know, alcohol gave me wings to fly, and then it took away the sky. And that was what happened to me. I graduated from college, magna cum laude, who's who in American colleges and universities, Delta Epsilon Sigma, Lambda Iota Tau, Phi Beta Kappa, all kinds of good things. I started out here. I got involved with an organization, the federal government. I got involved with something that was new as a profession at that time, and that was computers. And that shows you how far back that goes. These were new. But they were. As a matter of fact, one time in 1992, when Alex was about 8 years old and his sister was 5, we were back in Washington, D.C. going through the Smithsonian. And we were looking at in the Hall of Technology, and we were looking at the old computers, you know. And Alex has been involved with computers since he was 4 years old because we've always had something. And that's his profession today. He's a graphics designer, a web designer. But anyway, he was looking at those big computers and everything, and they were talking about it, and I said, you know, I hate to tell you, but I've worked in every one of those machines, you know, that is in there. But I got involved in that, and by the time I was 26 years old, I had a job that men twice my age would have envied me. You know, I had a large staff, I was involved, had a great reputation and everything else, but something was missing. And that's where I started out. I started out with that education, I started out with that experience, I started out with that job, and that was when I was 26 years old. By the time I was 27 years old, I was locked up in a mental institution because of alcoholism. In those days where I was, there was no rehabs, there was no detox centers, it was just the crazy house. And I had a choice at that point in time. I could either be crazy or I could be an alcoholic. And I chose to be crazy because crazy people can drink and alcoholics cannot. And that's true. That's exactly what I did. And I went in there, and you know, the interesting thing is that when you're in a psychiatric hospital like that, you don't have much time to do many things except look at yourself. And boy, does that get boring after a while, trying to dig and find out, you know, what your problems were. The other thing we got to do is we got to play volleyball. And I always say that if you go to an AA picnic, watch the people that are good volleyball players, because those are the ones that came from the mental institutions. But I spent a lot of time, you know, looking at myself and discussing, you know, what my problems were. And the doctor would come down about once a week, and we'd sit there, and he'd say, you know, why do you drink? And I'd say, well, because I'm in a job that has a lot of pressure. He said, no, why do you drink? And I say, well, it's because everybody around me drinks. This is what's expected. He said, no, why do you drink? It's because my family is whatever it is, and that's why I drink. Never did come up with the right answer, you know, until finally, when I was about 5 or 6 months sober, I was at a meeting in Denver at a place called Dipsahaven, and a guy got up and he says, you know, I was out at this judge in Adams County, and he asked me, he said, why do you drink? And I said, I drink because I want to get drunk. And I said, yes, that's the answer, see? And that was the answer that the psychiatrist was looking for, too. You know, I drank because I wanted to get drunk. And like the big book says, I liked the effect of what it did for me. The other thing is that, you know, in that hospital, digging down and finding out things, and we'd talk about them, and the doctor would say, well, what did you find out? And I'd say, such and such and such and such. And I'd say, oh, yeah, that's right. He says, I'd say, now what do I do? And he says, you change. I said, okay. How do you change? He says, you change. Well, if I knew how to change, I would change, you know. The problem is I didn't know how to change. And I didn't find out how to change until I came to the program Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found 2 steps that were absolutely miraculous called 6 and 7. And that's where I found out how to change. So anyway, you know, I got out of that hospital at the age of 27, and for the next 8 years, I went through all the way stations that alcoholics go on the way to bottom. You know, I lost the jobs. I told Alex last night, Alex knows some sanitized versions of my story, but he's going to hear some things tonight he may never have heard before. You know? And we'll start with my various marriages. Say the only marriage he knows about is this marriage to his mom. And we've been married for 27 years. But I actually got married when I was right out of college, when I was 22 years old. And she and I were married for 10 years. And the interesting thing is that she was an alcoholic also. And during that 10 years, we never had any children. Always figured we were doing things right, but you never know with alcoholics. But we never had any children. And she actually sobered up before I did. She said she and I had been divorced for a couple of years, and she got involved in AA. And she sobered up, and she met a guy in AA, and they ran off to the Pacific Northwest and got married. Well, the first thing you know, they end up having 2 kids. Well, when Susan and I got married, we ended up having 2 kids. See, and to me, right then and there, that tells me about the grace of God and the wisdom of God. Because if God had allowed us to have children, both of us being raging active alcoholics at that time, I'm not sure what would have happened to them. But instead, there were 4 children who were brought into this world in sober families and able to grow up in sober families. And so right there, I see and understand the wisdom of God. But anyway, over the next 8 years, I lost the jobs, I lost the wife, I lost the family, ended up going through the way stations, like I said, hospitals, jails, not for serious offense, for alcoholic-related offenses. The bad thing about it is, for me, was that the second time going to jail was easier than the first, and I should have known something at that point in time when I realized that. The first time was absolutely horrendous. The next time was, well, it's one of those things. And then the next time it's one of those things. So I went through all those things during that point in time on my way to bottom. I ended up at one point actually on the streets. And this is my point about talking about where I started, with the education and the honors and everything. Where I ended up is I know what it's like to sleep behind a dumpster. I know what it's like to sleep in the weeds. I'm a gutter drunk. I know what it's like to be on Colfax Avenue with 32 cents in my pocket, wondering how I can get drunk and doing it. I know what it's like to be willing to give up everything to drink alcohol. I had choices along the way. I had choices of retaining that marriage or getting drunk, and I chose to drink. And I had a choice to retain the job or to drink, and I chose to drink. And I had a choice to try to live a life like other people do or to live on the streets, and I chose to live on the streets and drink. And the thing of it is it didn't matter to me. It was okay. It was okay as long as I could drink alcohol. I was willing to give everything else up as long as I could drink alcohol. That was the thing that was the most important to me. The interesting thing that happened along the way is that I'd been unemployed and unemployable for a number of years, a couple of years, living on the streets. And 2 things happened. One is I had an opportunity to get a job. Somebody had lined me up with a job. And all I had to do was show up. And the night before, guess what happened? I got drunk. And of course, that was the whole thing. I'd been unemployed, unemployable for a couple of years. Ended up getting drunk at the wrong time, as it talks about in the big book. Never showed up for that particular interview. The other thing, though, is that later on that I did actually get a job. I got a job working for some people that actually I had worked for before that knew my history. And part of the deal was, not to drink. Well, I thought that meant you don't get caught drinking, not that you don't drink. And so I went back to work with these people, and what I would do then is I would go home by way of the liquor store every night and get the booze, go home, and then hide in my apartment, basically, and drink all day and all night, and get up the next morning, go to work, come back the next day, stop by the liquor store, and go through this. So I became a recluse drinker. I was not a bar drinker. I was never sociable. I'm not a very affable guy. I'm a very introspective type guy. And alcohol doesn't help that at all, I'll tell you. And so I was a recluse. And along the way there, I got lonely finally, because I wasn't having any human contact whatsoever. And one of the things I decided is I need somebody to talk to. And so I went out and bought a minor bird so that I would have somebody to talk to. And the minor bird's name was Zeke. And I'd come home every night, and I'd start drinking, and I'd start reading, and Zeke would try to talk to me, and I wouldn't even talk to Zeke. I'd just drink and drink and drink and, pass out and do whatever. And Zeke kept trying to talk to me, and after a couple of months, poor Zeke, he stopped talking, and he had a pretty good vocabulary. He stopped talking, and he started squawking instead. And he started kind of hanging on the side of his cage and beating his head up against the cage, and his feathers started falling out. And I finally ran into someone that had twin daughters. And I gave Zeke to them with the twin daughters, and the twin daughters were teenagers, and they just yacked themselves to Zeke all the time. And Zeke, all of a sudden, his feathers started growing back, And he stopped banging his head against the cage, and he started talking again. And I realized when I sobered up, you know, that alcoholism is indeed a family disease. You know, I had driven Zeke absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. I got to the program because I was in trouble one more time. The job that I had that had taken me off the streets was about to go because I had definitely been caught as far as drinking was concerned. And I had tried everything over the periods of time to get out of trouble, everything I could think of. I mentioned the psychiatric hospital. It'd be psychiatrists, it'd be priests, it'd be teachers, counselors, whatever it was. And I'd gone through all those, and the only place that I had not gone through was Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said that, you know, I had this ex-wife that had gone to Alcoholics Anonymous and gotten sober, and she and her husband. And although that irritated me a great deal, I decided to try Alcoholics Anonymous because I had nowhere else to go. And I came here to get out from under the trouble that I was in one more time. And I did not intend to stay. All I wanted to do was get out of trouble, stay sober if I had to for a period of time until I was out from under that, and then go back to living the way that I wanted to live, and that was to drink alcohol. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I wanted. You know, my first wife actually said to me one time, you know, when she was on me about the drinking, she says, "You've got to stop drinking." And I says, "I can't." And I didn't really know that I couldn't. I just told her, I says, "I can't, because if you take away the alcohol, what will I have to live for?" And that's exactly the way I thought, because I would do anything as long as I could drink alcohol. And so I came to get out from under the trouble that I was in, and I spent 3 weeks of bite-the-bullet sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not believe, I understood not drinking. I did not understand not wanting to drink. I thought that Alcoholics Anonymous was a group of old men, probably about my age now, sitting around a table, hanging on like this, commiserating with one another because they could not drink alcohol. And they were calling one another back and forth, you know, and they were hanging on tight because they could not drink alcohol. And if any one of them let go, they'd all go. And that's what I thought it was about. And so when I came to the program, I went through 3 weeks of bite-the-bullet sobriety. That's all I could handle. It was the 2nd of July. It was a Friday, 1976. The guy that I worked for, and that's a long story in itself, the guy that I worked for, as I left that day, said to me, "Now you be good over the weekend." And I said, "You son of a bitch, you can't tell me what to do. You know, don't you realize I have not had a drink in 3 weeks?" So I go off on my own, and I'm going to my Friday night meeting. And I get up there, and I see it's at a church. It was the acceptance group in Green Mountain in Lakewood, Colorado. And I see all these cars in the parking lot, and I think to myself, you know, there's going to be a lot of people at this meeting. It's a discussion meeting. And there's going to be so many people here that I'm not going to be able to talk. Well, I hadn't said a word in 3 weeks at any meeting. But this was important to me because there's going to be too many people for me to talk, and I thought to myself, I'll just go home and go down the hill. Now, at the bottom of the hill was a liquor store. And I said to myself, you know, I could have a couple of beers, and I'll just go tomorrow to the 10:30 meeting at the Arid Group and start all over again. And so I stopped in the liquor store, and like anybody else that's going to have a couple of beers, I bought a case of beer. And I took it home, and, you know, I remember opening that first beer, and I remember thinking, this isn't very smart, because I had a lot riding on the line. You know, all I had to do is get drunk one more time, and there was a lot of bad things that were going to happen to me. And I thought, you know, but who's going to know about this? And I remember thinking about it, and I drank that beer, and I just remember my mind turning, because after that beer, I said to myself, you know, I could drink just a couple of beers on the weekend, and that would be okay. And I had that second beer. And after the second beer, I remember thinking, well, you know, I really could have a couple of beers every night and then a few more on the weekend and nobody would know. And so I had that third beer. And then after the third beer, I said, well, what the hell? You know, and that was it. And I went on a 5-day drunk, basically. And during that 5 days, I got to the point where the very first time in my life, I wanted to do something and I couldn't do it. And what I wanted to do is stop drinking. I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know why I wanted to stop drinking. I had never wanted to stop drinking. It was never in my mind. But I wanted to stop drinking. I did not want to take that next drink, and I took that next drink. And I did not want to take that next drink, and I took that next drink. And Sarah, when I found out and learned that what I had said to my wife at that time, when I said I can't stop, I couldn't stop. There was no way that I could stop. So I called some people that I had met in AA and asked for help. And that was the first time in my life I ever asked anyone for help about anything. And I got involved with them, and they helped me quit at that point in time. And so I was able to put down the drink, and I was able to start going on a daily basis of not drinking alcohol. And one of the things they had told me in that 3 weeks when I was ignoring what they were telling me was they said, you know, if you want to stay sober today, when you get up in the morning, ask God not to let you take a drink. And as you go through the day, if you think about taking a drink, ask God for the strength not to let you take a drink. And if at the end of the day you have not taken a drink, thank God for not letting you take a drink. And I wouldn't do that because, see, God was a cop-out to me. God was one of those things that you blamed disasters on, you know. A God-given situation like a tornado or a hurricane or whatever, and an act of God. I did not believe that God was somebody that you could rely on. As a matter of fact, being brought up the way I was, it wasn't so much what I was taught, it's what I understood. And what I had was a very fearful, very vengeful, very frightening God in my life. That was what I understood. So I made every effort whatsoever to discredit the idea that there might be a God. Now, the only time I ever talked to God is when I got on an airplane, because I was frightened of flying. And when I'd talk to God when we go up, and then we'd start landing, and I'd say like this, you know, you and I have got to straighten this out one of these days. And as soon as you get this plane landed, we'll straighten it out. And of course, we never straightened it out. Once we got the plane landed, I went on my own way. But anyway, so I decided that I would try doing that. Now, 3 days after I came back into AA, and 3 days after I had my last drink, it was on a Friday morning. And I woke up that morning and I couldn't move. And to this day, I don't know what that's about. I don't know whether that was a physical paralysis, an emotional paralysis, a spiritual paralysis, a mental paralysis. But the truth of the matter is I could not move. And I was in such pain, more pain than I'd ever been in my entire life. And it occurred to me, when I say occurred, it occurred to me, big occur, that I had spent my entire life trying to solve my various problems and trying to fix my life. And I had never been successful at it. I could not do it. And I also realized that many, many people had been involved in my life who had tried to help me. But you know, they couldn't get inside there and fix that thing either. They had no more power to fix me. I did not have any power to fix me. If I couldn't fix me and they couldn't fix me, where do I go? And where I went is I had to go to God. And I said to God, you know, you have got to help me, and I'm willing to do whatever you want to help me at this point in time. And everything just smoothed over. I could move. I had this wonderful feeling of peace. I had this wonderful feeling of confidence. And I knew at that point in time that I need not drink again. I knew it at that point in time. So that was a vital spiritual experience for me. But the key to that vital spiritual experience was the innate knowledge that I had been given that what I need to do, I'd been given a grace period. And I don't know how long that grace period was going to be. But I'd been given a grace period as far as drinking alcohol is concerned. But part of that grace period is I had to get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I could not put my toe in the water. I had to go all the way. And that's exactly what I did. I got involved, and I got involved all the way. I got involved with a group of people. They were primarily men, but there were women also who believed in the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They believed that there was no time limit set down in the big book. It did not say that you had to be sober 6 days, 6 months, or 6 years to work the steps. What they did believe is that the big book tells you what a step is. It tells you how to do a step, and it tells you what results you should be getting from that step. And if you understand what that step is, and that you do that step, and you get the results from that step, then you move on to this next step. And that's exactly what I did. I moved on to the next step. I believe this is a program of immediate results. I believe that you don't have to be here 6 days, 6 months, or 6 years to get results. Because what happened to me over a period of time is that by praying on a daily basis, I stayed sober. And after 21 days of sobriety, which is the longest period of sobriety I'd had in 18 years, I realized what was happening. See, I'd spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours trying to solve my problems. And this simple little thing of asking God on a daily basis not to let me take a drink, that was working. If that would work on the most horrendous problem I'd ever had in my life, what would it do on other areas of my life? And at 21 days, I started praying about other things in my life. First thing I prayed about was my job, which was about, that was why I was in AA, because I was in trouble there. I prayed about that. And jumping ahead a little bit, I had 53 people working for me at that point in time. And every time I would go out in the hallway when I was drinking, every time I'd go out in the hallway, if somebody was out in the hallway, walking down the hallway, they'd immediately dash into another door to avoid me. They didn't like me. They were afraid of me because I was crazy, and unpredictable and moody. And nobody can relate to that, I'm sure. But anyway, they would do this. But 6 months, when I was 6 months sober, my belly button birthday came up. And the head boss called me up to his office. And I couldn't quite figure out why he called me up there. It was something that didn't make sense. We had a meeting for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I left and I walked back to my office, and I opened my office door, and there was this big birthday cake and all these balloons and everything, and they had decided, my staff had decided to throw me a birthday party. Now, would they have done that 6 months before I had been exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous? Absolutely not. See? But what they were doing, and they didn't know it, is they were celebrating the power of God working in my life and changing me. Because all of a sudden, from people that were afraid of me, these were people that wanted to honor me. And this was one of the most humbling experiences I had ever had, really. So I came into the program and I got involved. And again, I say, it's a program of immediate results. As soon as I started praying on a daily basis, I stopped drinking. That's immediate results. I got involved in the program, got involved with the steps. I got involved with service work. I got involved with lots of different things. But a couple of things that stuck with me was where the big book says that we want to get back in the mainstream of life. And the other part is in the 9th step where it says, we're trying to straighten out our lives, but what we're really doing is trying to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. That's become my mantra, if you want to call it that way. And becoming involved in the mainstream of life meant doing things like getting married, having children, starting businesses, helping other people, employing other people, doing all these things. I do not believe in sobriety being sitting in an AA club and spending your time there. I believe that what sobriety is taking the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, these 12 steps as a way of life, and it's what you do when you leave that AA club, when you leave that AA meeting. It's what you do with your family. It's what you do with your employees. It's what you do with your employer. It's what you do with your clients. It's what you do in your church. It's what you do in your community. This is what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to me. It's a program of action. Amen. I came to the program, as I said, with a very ambivalent idea of what God was, if at all. What I've learned in this program for me is that there is a big difference between the idea of God and the experience of God. What I'd been exposed to all my life was the idea of God. And it was taught to me, and what I found out is a lot of these ideas about God were not ideas founded on the experience of people that were teaching me that. They were actually ideas founded on somebody else's experience and their interpretation of that experience. What the program Alcoholics Anonymous has allowed me to do is gain access to a power greater than myself that I have experience with. When I got to the point where I had to turn my life and my will over to the care of God in the third step, what I did is I turned my life and my will over to the care of what I call the God of the second step. And the God of the second step is this: something got me here and something's keeping me sober. I don't know what that is. I don't need to know what that is. But something got me here and something's keeping me sober, and that's an experience with a power that's doing for me what I cannot do for myself. And if that power is willing to tackle the biggest problem in my life, I'm willing to let it have me entirely. And that's who I turned my life and my will over to, was that something that got me here and that's something that keeps me sober. Now, I talk about God today because through the 12 steps of the program Alcoholics Anonymous, I've gained access to God because that's who I met along the way. Through the steps, through step 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. I've learned about what selfishness and self-centeredness is. I've learned that that is really the root of my problem. I've learned that that is something that is not only the root of my problem, it's something I cannot do anything about. I cannot do anything about it. Because it tells me in the big book that selfishness and self-centeredness being the root of my problem, that I cannot get entirely free of self without God's help. I can wish and I can try on my own, but it isn't going to work. I have to have God's help. How do I get God's help? Through these 12 steps. You know, that's in the second step that it talks about that. Then there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, where I can gain access to this power and allow this power into my life to change me and do with me what it will so that I can be free of the bondage of self. Now, why is selfishness and self-centeredness so bad? That's why I drank. Because it drove me. The line in there, it says, we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion. They locked me up for delusions. And here I am trying to live on a basis of fear and self-delusion and self-seeking and self-pity. And based on those things in my life, I'm making decisions. And those decisions are the wrong decisions. But it says, we all had morals and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them. The interesting thing there, what I've learned is that, I had a friend who was sober for about 25 years. And during the drinking days, he chased around. He did all kinds of things, And he sobered up, and his wife told him after he was about 2 or 3 years sober, he said, and she knew all this. He had to lay it out to her. She said to him, you have the highest moral values of anybody I've ever met. And he says, what? He says, look at all the things I've done. How can you say that? She says, yeah, you never met those standards, but you had them. And that's the alcoholic. See, our standards are right up here, and our behavior is right down here. And what we have to do through these steps is I have to reduce my standards to reality, what human beings actually can do, and raise my behavior to here. Because what I'm doing up here is I'm playing God. Because one of the things I found in the 6th and 7th step for me is that I'm not God. See, I lie, cheat, and steal because I'm playing God. These are qualities that are God-like. The only way that I can get rid of them is I have to form a partnership with God. And in the 7th step, see, what I was taught is, in the 6th step, character defects are those things that I shouldn't do, which I just mentioned. In the 7th step, shortcomings is not doing those things I should do. Love, honesty, compassion, understanding, generosity, helpfulness, all those things. These are God-like qualities also. By myself, I don't know about other people. I don't know about normal people, whatever they are. I don't know about that, whether they can do it by themselves or not. But I cannot. I have to form a partnership with God to be able to live the way that God wants me to live. And that's to live in the virtues rather than in the vices. And I also believe that this is not by accident. Because if I had the capabilities of doing that, I would not need God. And I'm right back to where I started, the spiritual hunger that I was talking about. The reason I had that spiritual hunger is because there was something missing in my life that prevented me from living the way I knew that I should be living. And part of it was eventually not being successful at living this way of giving up, saying, what the hell? So I found in 6 and 7, that definitely I'm not God. I need God, and I can have God. Again, through the steps, as I say, that it has allowed me to have the experience of God in my life. I believe this to be a program of magic and miracles. I learned magic and I learned miracles early on. Because what I learned was that as I did a step, something happened. Something happened within me. Something happened outside there. Every single step and every single time I do a step, even today, something happens. And I cannot take credit for what happens. And I can't place logic on what happens. It's a miracle. It's magic. And this is what the program is all about. When I talk about miracles, I've seen that things appear and disappear. I had a guy in a meeting say one time, God's not all that powerful. He's got to conform to the laws of the universe. And I said, no way, buddy. No way, I've had little miracles that sometimes have more meaning than big miracles. And I've had big miracles. I've had huge miracles. My family is a miracle. I don't want to talk about if I ever got what I deserved, I'd rather not talk about that at all. Because I found a merciful God, that has given me great gifts and great blessings. Because I have not earned or merited any of this stuff. I have not earned or merited sobriety, for that matter. All I've done is I've asked for it and been willing to accept it, and the way I ask for it and I'm willing to accept it is through the practice of these 12 steps. And as I say, they're magic and they're miracles. And although I experienced the magic and miracle of each one of these steps the first time through, the most important thing that my sponsor taught me and the people that I was involved with taught me is how to put these steps in my life on a daily basis as a way of life. And that gets back to, what do I do when I walk out of this room today? How do I apply this program in my life today? And why do I do it? Do I do it because it's altruistic and I'm a good guy and it makes me a good boy? No, I do it because it works, because it brings into the things in my life I've talked about, the businesses, my family, the relationships that I have, the friends that I have, the feeling of confidence in myself, all the things I ever wanted, I have today as a result of this. Tell you one of the stories of a little miracle. I love this little miracle because it's so potent. If you don't believe in God, I'll tell you, back up even one more. If you're not sure about God and about power, because this program's about power, it starts with lack of power. Lack of power is our dilemma, but it's about power. It's about gaining and having power in your life. And it's ultimately about power, being given the power to help others. That's what it ultimately says in the big book. But anyway, I had a lady one time that worked with a lot of different ladies in the program. This is back 30 years ago when they had shag rugs. And she'd work with these ladies and she'd say, you don't know whether God's really there or the power of God. And they say, yeah. And she says, if you have pierced ears, have you ever dropped the backing off an earring in a shag rug? And they say, yeah. I said, did you ever find it again? And they say, no. I said, the next time you do that, ask God to show you where it's at. And they go away, and they'd come back the next week, and they'd say, it's amazing. I dropped this backing of this earring, and I took your advice. I asked God to show me where it was, and I found it right away. See, God wants you to ask these kinds of things. And that's maybe where you start. Asking the little things on a daily basis and looking for the results. Because prayer doesn't do you any good if you ask and don't look for the results. You have to look for the results. And too often, we'll pray, throw a prayer, need all the help I can get, need a miracle, and then rush off on our own to do our own thing and forget about looking for the answer to the prayer. We're too busy to see the answer to the prayer, but it's there. One time I had a car that had a little over 100,000 miles on it, and the speedometer had stopped working, and I was sitting on Evans Avenue in Denver going across Federal, and the speed limit was 25 miles an hour. And as I was going through the light, a Denver police car pulled up behind me. And I had no idea how fast I would be going, particularly at 25 miles an hour speed limit. And so I quickly asked God, I said, God, please help me keep the right speed here so that I don't get a ticket. And all of a sudden I look down and the speedometer goes all the way up and it's sitting there at 25 miles an hour. Now this hadn't worked in months. And I'm going down the road, and we go down the road about 6 or 8 blocks, and the cop turns off to the left, and the speedometer needle goes boom. Okay, and never to work again. These are the little things. See, I've learned about practice the presence of God. Practice the presence of God is to pray, look for the results, look for those things in my life on a daily basis that I cannot take credit for. Look for things in my life on a daily basis that no one can take credit for. And if I open myself up and I ask to be shown, I will see these things, these little miracles. And these little miracles grow into big miracles. And these big miracles grow into a way of life. And it's available to anybody. I like what it says in the big book where it says, the world of the Spirit is broad and roomy. It's not exclusive. We believe it's open to all men. And it says in there, that you need not even believe in God. All you have to do is be willing to believe that there might be a power greater than yourself. And upon that basis, you can get results. And I believe that. I do believe that each person has an opportunity through the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to have a spiritual awakening, as it says in the 12th step. And the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we carry this message. What's the message? The message is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The byproduct of that is not drinking alcohol. The byproduct of that is finding a successful life. The byproduct of that is being able to live today in a manner that I never could even imagine of being able to live ever before. But the message that I stand up here and share with you tonight, and the message I share at noon discussion meetings, and the message that I share wherever I'm at and asked to speak, is the message of having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. This is a message that I carry. I'm a very grateful man because I have more in my life today than I have ever had in my entire life. My life gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It never gets smaller. In the last year or so, under the economic conditions that we've been in, from a business standpoint, it's been a very difficult time. And what it has given me an opportunity to do is once more get back into the 12 steps of the program Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I'm a believer in working the steps. I'm a believer in working the steps formally. I do not believe, for me, that I can work the steps once and go about my life and that's the rest of my life. I believe that I have to continually work at these things. I believe that the indication that I have to continually work at these things is when I'm going straight and my life turns left. And that happens quite often. that's when I get right back to basics again. I get right back to redoubling my efforts as far as meetings are concerned. I redouble my efforts as far as working with other people are concerned. I redouble my efforts as far as reading the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and trying to apply these steps. And in the last year, it started with a lady and I, she asked me if I would do the third step with her, and I did that. And I told her, I said, you know, when you leave here, look as to what happens in your life. And I tell anybody I work the third step with to look. Right now, as soon as you walk out the door, you're going to see something in your life. What I didn't know is I was going to see something in my life too. And I did. And what I saw was change, tremendous change that's going on in my life and has been going on for the last year. It's a period of transition. It's a period of you know, Alex is on his own. His sister, Katie, who is 22 years old, are out on their own. My wife and I are finding other things and interests in our lives that we need. You know, talk about spiritual experiences. One of the things that I believe that if you have a spiritual experience, you're then able to do things that you've never been able to do before. How do you have a spiritual experience? 12 steps. Then you're able to do things you've never been able to do before, starting with not drinking alcohol. I never was able to do that before. But spiritual experience, I was not able to not drink alcohol. My wife, 10 years ago, was up on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and I hope she forgives me for telling this story, but basically she had a spiritual experience when she was up there. And one of the things that she realized that she had to work with the Indian people, the Lakota people, on Pine Ridge, and that was her mission in life. And I've watched her the last 10 years do things that she was never able to do before. She's been able to start a nonprofit organization. She was able to raise money. She's been able to feed people. She's been able to clothe people. She's been able to help children. She's been able to do all these things that are because those are the things that she's supposed to be doing. And my point of this is that we alcoholics do not have the corner on spiritual experiences. Other people have them too. And they have the same effect and the same power in their lives if they pursue them. I know people who have had spiritual experiences and have chosen not to pursue them and have limited their lives. Again, you know, the things that are happening for me today, probably 4 or 5 days ago, I had I don't know whether it's an epiphany, a flash. Of course, Bill Wilson used to call his spiritual experience a hot flash, so I don't know. Anyway, I had this flash, and the flash was not that I'm becoming a teacher or want to be a teacher, but I am a teacher. See? And that goes back to something I heard on a tape a long, long time ago, is it said that, you know, when they give a doctor a medical degree, that doesn't make him a doctor. He became a doctor along the way. He became a doctor through the education. He became a doctor through the practice. He became a doctor. All they did is recognize him as a doctor by giving him that medical degree. See? And that's what's happened for me, and I'm delighted in the knowledge. That's what's happened to me over the last 33 years. It's through the practice of this program, through trying to carry this message, through working with other alcoholics, through trying to apply the steps on a practical basis in my life. What I've become is a teacher. And I have a lot of people that come to me, and I'm humbled by that, because it's not me. It's the power of God and this program working through me when I'm open to it. I have a lot of people that come to me. This is so amazing. I mean, it blew me away. 5 days ago at a noon meeting, a guy, 45 seconds before the meeting started, the chairman was opening the book to read. He asked me a question. I suggested an answer to him. The meeting starts 45 seconds later. He comes back to me 3 days later and he said, what you said in that 45 seconds revolutionized my life. He says, all the problem that I had that I went into that meeting with, which included getting arrested and some bunch of other stuff, and he's been sober a long time, he said, I understood it, and I found peace in what you said in 45 seconds. Did I say it? No. I did not say it. I don't even know what I said. I really don't. It was some standard thing that I would say in 45 seconds to anybody, like, well, you're suffering from self-will. But it revolutionized his life. Because I said it? No, because of the power of God in this program. See? And every one of us that are in this room tonight have the message also. And wherever you are in the path of sobriety, you have that message. I was taught that if you have 3 days sobriety, you tell the guy that has 2 days sobriety how you got that third day. Everyone in this room has a message that can be shared with another person that will help raise up another person who's looking for sobriety. And that's a gift, because it does say in the big book, it says we're given the power to help others. That's a God gift to us. And if you think about it, why am I sober? I'm sober because I have work to do for God. And that work is to carry the message to other alcoholics to help lift them up on the path of sobriety. It says in the second step also, it says, when we not only do we have to stop playing God and that God is our Father and we are His children, it says that He is the principal and we are His agents. An agent is someone that works for the principal. That means I have to go out and do God's work. It's back to the 9th step, to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. That's what we're all about. And what is that? We're given the power to help others. Interesting thing is that as a gutter drunk, only an alcoholic can reach up over the curb in the gutter and look down on other people. But as an agent of God, through the 12 steps of the program Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not looking down on other people, we're lifting other people up. It was mentioned here earlier. A lady said that everything that she had was a gift from God and Alcoholics Anonymous, and that she loved Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I've had in my life in the last 33 and a half years, everything I have today and everything I'm going to have today is a gift from God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not too bad for a gutter drunk, to have all these things. It's not too bad for a gutter drunk to find access to the power of the universe and find out how to allow that to work in my life, but also, more importantly, how to show other people how to allow that power to work in their life also. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'm glad to have been here tonight.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.